Tackle Junkies, what's going on, fellas? Today we're going to check out my rod arsenal. All right, fellas, before we jump into this, let's clear one thing up. Okay, you do not need 100 rods to catch fish. You know, a rod or two will do. Akuma has been one of my sponsors for the last 3 or 4 years. I used their rods even before that. You know, the amount of rods has accumulated over the years, and this is where we're at today. So again, I just want to go over the rods that I have, why I use the rods, kind of what I use each rod for. Majority of these are like multiple of the same rod. So again, we'll go over what I like to use on each rod, and if you're looking for a rod, maybe I'll hit on something, and you know, that'd be another option for you. If you have any questions, you know, leave those down in the comments. And I'm not one of those guys that only recommends, you know, sponsor products. If your needs is not really an Akuma rod, I'm going to recommend something else. I just want to throw that out there. And I'm sure most of you guys know that from past experience. You know, I'm always recommending, you know, different reel brands and hooks and baits and all that, regardless of who I work with. I want to recommend the right product for you. And again, I just want to go over why I like these rods, and possibly you could like them as well, okay? So first up, we're going to start with one of my longer rods. You may want to grab yourself some popcorn, maybe your favorite beverage. This could be somewhat of a longer video. I really do appreciate you guys clicking on the video, and it'd be awesome if you guys could give me a thumbs up. Really do appreciate that. But first up here, guys, we do have the Akuma TCS rod. Majority of these here are the TCS rod. These are the TCS, EVX, and the SX. Okay, and of course we'll get into all of them. This is the TCS here, and this is the original TCS. All right, we'll get into that here in a second. But this is a 7'6" flipping jig rod. I mainly use this rod just for flipping. Okay, I don't like to pitch with it. I like a shorter rod for pitching and more accurate. I do have a video on the MTB channel on flipping versus pitching. I'll link that down below. Definitely check that out. But again, I mainly use this rod for flipping. Summertime, let's say I'm fishing the ponds and I'm throwing a swim jig, I do like this rod. It's a lot of matted grass over there, so that longer rod gives me a little more leverage from the bank to get the fish in, okay? So again, flipping jig rod, but I do mainly use it for really basically flipping. That's pretty much it. But this is a 7'6" again. Heavy power, fast action. You'll see here it's got a flipping guide on it, all right? Now, some of you guys don't like that guide. So if you don't like it, check out the newer TCS rods, which I do have some of those here, which we'll get into in a little bit. But the newer TCS rod does not have that guide. This is just a guide that Scott wanted on these rods. So again, they are not on the newer TCS rods. And the newer TCS rods, it's the same blank. It's just upgraded components, guides, you know, reel seats and graphics on the rod, but it's the same blank as before. Okay, anyway, 7'6" flip-in jig rod. Okay, from there we'll go to this is the Frog swim bait rod. Got that paired up with the Akuma Helios SX reel. Awesome looking combo here, guys. But don't let the branding fool you with this rod. I do have a review on this rod, which I'll link down below. It's the older model, but like I said, it's the same blank. And it says Frog swim bait, but it's a pretty versatile rod. You know, I used it for spinner baits. I don't even use it for frogs. Spinner baits, I do like it for swim baits. I do have a belly weighted swim bait hook on there that I like to use with this rod. I use it for S-wavers, which I really don't catch any fish on, but I do still toss those with this rod. You know, it's a good rod for me for pitching. It's a 7'3". It's a heavy power, fast action. Typically, I do like a little bit shorter rod for pitching, but I will use this for pitching as well. Texas rig jigs. I mean, it's a pretty good multi-purpose rod when you're leaning towards some heavier weights. It does load at 1/4, so it will still load some lighter weights, but it does max out at 2 ounces. Okay, and that is the Frog swim bait rod. Again, that is the newer model there. If you can see the graphics a little bit different. The reel seat there, if you guys can see that. And of course, it's got upgraded guides and things like that. So really, really nice rod here. Again, the Frog swim bait rod. I will link my review down below. But I mainly use this rod if I had to pick one thing that I use this rod for, it would be swim baits, mainly like the 5-inch Kitech and Biospawn, things like that. I mainly use this rod, mainly just for those. Okay, next up, we'll go with the 7-foot. You know, really, I would say this is one of my favorite rods, but really all of them are kind of like my favorite rods. Pretty much got like 5 of each model just because I love all these rods. Okay, this one here is the Jig Worm. Okay, fantastic for jigs, worms, soft plastics. I do use it for that, but I mainly use this rod for buzz baits, frogs, either hollow belly or like rage toads, and I love it for swim jigs. If I had to pick one thing that I use it the most for, it's probably going to be swim jigs or frogs. Pretty much a tie between those two. But again, it is labeled there Jig Worm, but I really do like it for the moving baits, like I said, swim jigs, frogs, buzz baits, rage toads. It's a heavy power. It's a 7-foot heavy power, but it's got a mod fast action to it. It's a little bit softer tip to it. Again, great for those moving baits. 7-foot heavy mod fast. And now the last rod that we talked about, the frog swim bait, that was a 7.3 heavy fast. Now, majority of the rods in the TCS lineup are a softer action, but there is a handful of them that have a faster action. That being said, the 7.3 frog swim bait, even though it's a faster action and it's a heavy power, it's still not that stiff of a rod. So again, you can still use it for, like I said, spinner baits and things like that. Okay? But for the most part, you're going to notice in the TCS lineup that they do have a softer action to them. So we just went over the worm jig rod. Again, that is one of my favorites. I do have, like I said, like 5 of that rod as well. You know, I love tossing a swim jig, rage toad, really a couple of my favorite ways to fish, you know, right there, other than, you know, squarebill and spinnerbait. But from there we'll go to the Martin APC, okay? This one here is the 7-footer. It's a medium heavy mod fast action, okay? Now, when I say mod fast action on a lot of these rods, you know, they're not, typically you hear that like in a cranking rod. They're not as soft as a cranking rod. Like the cranking rods from Akuma, they're a moderate fast, so they're just a little bit softer in the backbone area leading up to the tip. Okay, so this rod here is a medium heavy mod fast action, so it's still softer, but not as soft as the cranking rods. Okay, so Martin APC. This one here loads to 3/16, maxes out at 3/4. I mainly use this rod for chatterbaits. You know, you could use it for crankbaits. You know, I still like my rod just a little bit softer than this one here, but you could get away with some crankbaits, rattle traps, you know, if you're ripping them out of grass, things like that. But if I had to pick one thing that I really like this rod for, it would be chatterbaits. Again, Martin APC, it's a 7-footer, okay? Medium heavy, mod fast action. From there we go to the Martin APC. This one right here. But this one is in, this one is in a 6.9. Martin APC 6.9. Again, it's a medium heavy mod fast action to it. Okay, I love this rod for spinnerbaits. I mean, it's a lot of fun to fish with a spinnerbait. 6.9, great for little roll casts, you know, target fishing, sidearm casts, and all that. Fantastic rod to fish with for spinnerbaits. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and you always hear me talk about this rod when I'm trying to toss lighter lures as well. You know, little bitty 1/8 ounce underspin and things like that. This is the rod that I go to right here. It loads at 1/8, maxes out at 3/4. So again, great moving bait rod. But if I had to pick one thing that I throw on it the most, it's going to be spinnerbaits or underspins. But again, if I'm loading a lighter lure, it's going to be the underspin. But again, it's just a blast to fish with for spinnerbaits. Okay, so the 6.9 Martin APC would be my go-to spinnerbait rod. And then the 7-footer Martin APC will be my go-to chatterbait rod. From there, we'll go to a rod in the EVX lineup. Okay, now this is a spinnerbait specific rod. I believe it's labeled spinnerbait and worm, and I mainly use this one for spinnerbaits as well. This is the EVX lineup here, so a step down from the TCS. Now, majority of the EVX rods have a faster action, except for the specific few like the cranking rods or the spinnerbait rod here. Things like that, but majority of the rods have a faster action to them. Now this is a 6.8 medium heavy mod fast action to it, loads at a quarter, maxes out at 1 ounce. Again, it's just another fun rod to fish with. I like a shorter rod for spinnerbait. Normally I'm target fishing, again, around docks, laydowns, stumps, you know, things like that. You know, I just love target fishing with a spinnerbait. So I do like that shorter rod. I'm more accurate with it. So again, 6/8, medium heavy mod fast action, EVX spinnerbait rod. Some of you guys have asked about these. I'm not partnered with this company at all. These are the Trigger Happy Comfort Grips. I do plan to get a bunch more of these and kind of use them to, I guess, let me know what line I have on each reel. Okay, it's kind of my plan. Have a certain color for like 10-pound test, certain color for 12, 15, and so on, which I'll do a video on that down the road. But yeah, it's just a little deal you put on your trigger there, and like I said, it's very comfortable. So you guys can see that. Trigger Happy Comfort Grips. I'll go ahead and link those down below. You guys can check those out. I believe Tackle Warehouse carries them as well. Anyways, though, 6/8, medium heavy, mod fast action, EVX, spinnerbait rod. I do have a few of those. From there, we'll go to, these are mainly cranking rods here, but we'll go ahead and grab the 6/8 that we were just talking about. This is the medium heavy. This one here is a medium, pretty much same rod, just a medium power. It's labeled top water jerkbait, and it's pretty much what I toss with it. Top waters and jerkbaits. And again, I like that shorter rod when I'm working those particular baits. That way I'm not smacking the water and smacking the boat. It does load at 1/8, maxes out at 3/4. Yeah, 3/4. So it's great for you know, little small poppers and things. I've even tossed like little, like those micro buzz baits and things like that on it as well. But mainly I use this rod for small poppers, smaller jerk baits, you know, things like that. Again, loads at 1/8, maxes out at 3/4. And when I'm going to throw a little bit heavier jerk bait or a popper or even like a square bill in close quarters, I'll go to the 6/6. It's a TCS jerk crank rod, and it loads at 3/8. So again, this is not great for those lighter square bills and poppers, things like that, just because it loads at 3/8, not an 1/8 or even a 1/4 like the EVX. Okay, which we'll get into that here in a second. But this is the 6/6. Again, really, it's a fun square bill rod as well for tight quarters and things like that. But 6/6 TCS jerk crank rod. Okay, from there we'll go back up here. These are my cranking rods. Now you'll notice with the EVX cranking rods, we do have a full handle here. Okay, full handle. Okay, this one here is a medium power. I do have 2 medium, and then I got 5 medium heavy. The medium heavy is what I use the most. But this one here loads at 1/8, maxes out at 5/8. So again, this is great for your smaller cranks, shad wraps, you know, things like that. Lighter weights, tougher to toss with a little bit heavier rod. So you want to look for a rod that loads a lighter lure, so it really gives you less hassle on the water. So for my lighter crankbaits and things like that, I'm going to go to this rod right here in the medium power. And then for majority of my other cranking, we'll go to the medium heavy. And this is what I was talking about just a little bit ago. This medium heavy loads at 1/4, maxes out at 1 ounce. Now the TCS cranking rod, you know, I've used for years, love it, but it loads at 3/8. So on my lighter crankbaits, I step down to this rod here just because it loads a lighter weight. You know, a lot of you guys are having issues, backlashing and all that. You know, besides line conditioner, one of the other things that I ask you guys about is what weight are you tossing on that rod? Because you at least need to meet the minimum rating on your rod, or you don't have enough weight to load the tip on the back cast. So that really is a backlash waiting to happen. So my lighter cranks, I do toss on this rod here. But yeah, that's a 7-foot medium heavy mod fast action EVX series. I believe the crank rods are right around $100. Maybe the other rods are right around $115. Guys, like I said, I know they are a sponsor of mine, but I mean, I got with this company because of how much I like the rods. So of course, I'm going to recommend them to you just because I love them. And for that price, it really is tough to beat. I mean, there are a few other contenders out there in that price range, but I definitely would check these out if you're in the market for, like I said, an affordable rod. And like I said, a great rod at that. Okay, so that is the medium heavy there. And then we'll go ahead and go to the 7-footer TCS that we were kind of comparing this to. Again, I use this one a ton as well, but it loads at 3/8, maxes out at 3/4. So if you're going to toss like 1.5s, 2.5s, baits like that, this rod is fantastic. But if you're going to try and toss something a little bit lighter, Bandit 100s and things like that, you're going to want to step down to the EVX where it loads at a quarter, just because they're just a little bit easier to toss on that rod. I mean, if you're more experienced, like I can still toss the Bandits and the smaller cranks on this rod. If you're more experienced, it's not that big of a deal. But if you are having issues with that, definitely pay attention to the lure rating on the rod. Okay, this is a 7-footer here. Now these are a medium plus, and it's a moderate mod fast. So again, a little bit softer there in the backbone, which leads into a nice soft tip. Again, that's a 7-footer TCS crankbait jerkbait rod. Okay, of course we got a handful of those as well. Okay. From there we'll talk spinning. I don't have a ton of spinning gear. You know, I got 2 main rods that I use. And when I'm really going to pick a rod for spinning gear, or I guess to toss, you know, lighter lures, what I'm looking at is the lure rating. Like this one here is a 7-1. It's a medium heavy. And a medium heavy, this particular rod, it loads at 1/8. So this is the rod that I use for shaky heads. You know, it's nice having, you know, a rod that'll load 1/8, but still got plenty of backbone to set that hook. And like I said, if I'm gonna finesse fish, most of the time it's gonna be, you know, with a shaky head. This rod is labeled a shaky head tube. Again, it's a 7-1 medium heavy, fast action, loads in 1/8, maxes out at 3/4. Really good spinning rod here. Like I said, I mainly use this one for the shaky head. And then we have a medium here, you know, medium power here, which loads at a 1/16. Again, it's a 7-1 medium power fast action. So if I'm tossing, you know, extra light line, you know, 4, 6, 8 pound test, what's it rated here? It's rated 6 to 12, so you want to definitely keep it there at 6. But yeah, if I'm throwing that lighter pound test, really light lures, I'm going to go to this rod here as it loads at a 1/16, but it'd be much easier to cast with this rod compared to the medium heavy. So lighter line, lighter lures, I go to the medium. A little bit heavier line, a little bit heavier lures, maybe a little bigger gauge wire hook on my shaky head, something like that. I'll go to the medium heavy. It has a little more backbone to help me set the hook. Typically, I keep, you know, 6 to 8 on this rod, and I keep 8 to 12 on this spinning one here. Probably 10 would be the one that I use the most on the medium heavy, and probably 8 I use the most on the medium here. But yeah, that's the spinning rods that I use. Keep it pretty simple with them. Like I said, medium heavy, fast action. These couple rods here, to be honest, I have not used them yet. It's a couple more series from Akuma. This is the only one that I have of each series. This is the Serrano. I believe it's called Serrano. It's a 7.3 heavy. 7.3 heavy. It's rated pitching, punching, swim bait, Carolina rig, big worm. And I'll probably end up using this rod for big worms during the summertime. So we'll go ahead and talk about this rod more then. But I do really like the grips on this rod as well. Kind of got that like that wind grip deal to it. It says wind on there. Yes, that is a wind grip there on those rods. Nice comfortable grip on there. And that is a 7.3 heavy. So there's that one there. This one here is the Saros, I believe. A little more affordable rod here. This one is a 7.3 medium heavy. It's labeled finesse, football jig, Texas rig, worm, stick baits, spinner bait, and vibrating jig. And I'll probably use this rod here for chatterbaits. Again, we'll go over these rods when I use them throughout the year. Now, before I jump into the SX rods, I got some rods here behind you. Let's grab one of each. I got about 6 of these back here and about 3 of these back here. This one here is a 7.2 medium heavy fast. Okay, I do believe a 7-footer or 7.2, something in that range, medium heavy fast, is probably one of the best all-purpose, all-around rods that you can get. Now, it all does depend on the type of cover that you're fishing around, the type of fish that you're targeting, things like that. But for at least me, for the weights that I'm fishing, the areas that I'm fishing, the baits that I like to fish, a medium heavy fast can do pretty much anything, okay? You know, from Texas rigs, jigs, spinner baits, buzz baits, chatter baits, swim jigs, flukes, Cincos. I've even tossed crankbaits on this rod. You know, if I'm going to go on a buddy's boat, if I'm going to go to the ponds, I don't want to bring a few rods. I'm going to bring a few of these just because I believe they're that versatile. Okay, really this rod here in this lineup or the worm jig rod in the TCS lineup are really 2 of my most versatile rods that I can do a lot of different things on. But a medium heavy fast is really tough to beat. So if you are looking for one of your first rods, and again, you're not fishing real heavy weights, you're not trying to pitch and flip and punch with it, you know, you're not fishing around a lot of vegetation and mats and all that, you're just looking for a good all-around rod to take to the ponds or take to the lakes, do a bunch of different techniques, I would definitely check out a medium heavy fast. Again, that's why I have 6 of these rods. They're so versatile. Now, if you need just a little bit more beef, you know, you can go to the heavy, just a step up from that rod, the heavy power. Still toss everything in that I just mentioned, but in a little bit heavier weights. Okay, good. Again, it's a good Texas rig, jig, spinnerbait, buzzbait, chatterbait, swim jig, Senko, fluke, whatever, you name it. You can toss them on these 2 rods, but if you need a little more beef, go to the heavy power. A little less beef, go to the medium heavy. 2 really, really versatile rods right here. Again, 7'2", medium heavy, heavy, fast action rod. All right, guys, we talked about the TCS rods, which for the most part have a softer action to them. We talked about the EVX, which for the most part have a faster action to them, and they're a step down from the TCS. We did mention Serrano and the Saros, which we'll talk more about those during the season. From there, we have the SX, which this is the top of the line rod from Akuma. I don't have a ton of experience with these yet. I got these at the end of last season, so I don't have many trips with them. But again, it's a very sensitive rod. It's a rod that I'm going to be reaching for when I'm working the bottom. Okay, you know, Texas rigs, jigs, things like that. Of course, you can use them for other things, but just more of a sensitive blank. It makes sense to use this rod when you're working the bottom, again, with the Texas rig jig. When you need the sensitivity is when you want to reach for the SX. Now, this particular rod here is a 7'2", medium power, fast action, loads at 1/8, maxes out at 5/8. You see here, these are my newer rods here that I plan to use this year. And we do have a bunch of the SX in there, some 7-footers, medium heavy. We got some 7.3 medium heavy, I believe, the 7.2 mediums and all that. For the most part, guys, you know, 7-footer I like, you know, when I'm target fishing, when I'm not really making a long cast. You know, when I'm making that long cast, I want a little bit longer rod to get me that long cast. Plus, that longer rod picks up more line on the hook set. It's easier to set the hook on a longer cast with more rod. For the most part, with a medium heavy, heavy, power, fast action, I'm going to throw pretty much the same stuff on all 3 of those rods. Now, it will vary a little bit. It all depends on the cover that you're around, the size bait that you're using as far as weight and gauge of wire, you know, how thick the hook is, and of course the pound test that you need to use as well. But for the most part, I'm going to throw, you know, I'll throw a jig on a medium, I'll throw a jig on a medium heavy, and I'll throw a jig on a heavy. On the heavy, I might be using 20 pound test fluorocarbon, throwing a 1/2 or 3/4. On the medium heavy, I might have on 15 pound test fluorocarbon, throwing 3/8 or a 1/2. On a medium, I might have on, you know, 10 or 12 pound test fluorocarbon and throwing a little 3/16 or a 1/4. It just depends on maybe the fall rate that I'm looking for. If I'm open water fishing, if I'm around cover, if I'm targeting bigger fish, you know, there's a lot of variables that come into play as far as which rod I'm going to pick. Okay, but for the most part, I'm going to toss the same things on all those rods that have a faster action to them, just different weight, different pound test, things like that. Okay, so good do-all type rods, just pick the right rod for the situation. Now this combo right here, man, it's very comfortable in hand. That's the SX reel on there. Super lightweight combo, very comfortable. Got a little scrounger head on there. But yeah, that is the medium power fast action. Like I said, we have a variety of different ones there. As far as the rest of the rods over here, we got a couple 7.6, which I'll use these for flipping. Okay, 7.6, heavy, fast action. We already talked about the SX 7-footers, the medium heavies. Okay, we got some more EVX here. Again, like we mentioned earlier, a couple more of the heavy power, fast action, a couple more cranking rods. Another frog swim bait rod there. We do have a couple spinny rods in the SX lineup. So I do believe one is a medium and one is a medium white. Yeah, this is a medium power here. This one loads at 1/8, maxes out at 5/8. And on the back side here, we just have some more TCS rods. Some more of my favorites. This is the new TCS rods. Like I said earlier, it's same blank, just upgraded components, you know, upgraded guides, reel seats, and different graphics on the rod. Of course, we got some all-purpose rods here, 2 of the 6.9, 2 of the 7-footers, the worm jig, and a couple of the cranking rods as well. So anyways, guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to smash the thumbs up. Hopefully you guys take something away from this video, maybe really what to look for in a certain rod, you know, something like that. If you guys haven't checked out the Akuma rods, definitely check them out. Again, I really appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget to smash the thumbs up. We'll see you guys on the next one.